Welcome back to Terror at Urban Myths. Tonight we're taking you to a chilling tale, a tale that's been spreading like wildfire across the internet. It's the legend of the abyssinic clouds. And if you are enjoying these journeys into digital horror, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like.
You know, this story is fascinating. It takes something familiar like the sky and twists it into a source of dread.
Right, you look up expecting to see the sun, the clouds maybe a bird or two, and instead,
You're met with the Amazon clouds, these dark, swirling masses that move with an unnatural speed, an unsettling purpose. It's like they're sentient, aware, and watching.
it's that element of being watched that really gets to me. It taps into a primal fear, doesn't it? The feeling that we're not alone, that something out there is observing us,
Yeah.
judging us, maybe even waiting for the right moment to...
To act, yes, exactly. The legend doesn't explicitly state what the amazing clouds do, but it implies a threat, a sense of impending doom. This deliberate ambiguity, this lack of concrete information, actually amplifies the horror. It allows our imaginations to run wild, to fill in the blanks with our deepest fears.
And that's where the story gets under your skin. It plays on our inherent need to understand,
Mhm.
to categorize, to explain the world around us. But the amazing clouds defy explanation. They represent the unknown, the unknowable.
And that unknown can be absolutely terrifying. The legend begins with a simple but chilling premise. An emergency message is broadcast. It warns everyone to not look at the sky. No explanation. Just a stark, urgent command. Imagine receiving that message. What would your initial reaction be?
I think most of us would be skeptical at first,
Right.
maybe even a little amused, but the story emphasizes the urgency of the message, the sheer panic behind it. That's what starts to plant that seed of doubt, that unsettling feeling that something is deeply, deeply wrong.
Exactly. And then we meet our protagonist, a language translator who, like many of us, can't resist the allure of the forbidden. Despite the warning, he looks up at the sky, and that's where the horror highly begins. His description of the Amazon clouds, their unnatural movement, their oppressive darkness, instantly sets them apart from anything we've ever experienced. They're not just clouds. They're something other, something alien.
It's like looking into a mirror reflecting not our world, but something else entirely, something vast and incomprehensible. And the story cleverly uses the translator's friend, Patrick, as a foil to amplify this sense of terror. Patrick is the skeptic, the voice of reason. He initially dismisses the whole thing as nonsense.
Until he sees the clouds for himself, and in that moment, his skepticism vanishes. He's confronted with something that shatters his understanding of the world, something so profoundly unsettling that it reduces him to screams of terror.
And those screams, described in vivid detail in the story, become a crucial part of the horror. They are a visceral, immediate expression of fear. We're not just told that Patrick is scared. We hear it. We feel it.
And then, silence. The screams abruptly end, leaving us with a chilling question. What happened to Patrick? Did the Amazon clouds consume him? Did they drive him mad? The story doesn't provide answers. And that lack of closure is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of all. It leaves us hanging suspended in that moment of terror, wondering what fate might await us if we were to make the same mistake.
It's that silence, that abrupt cutoff that really chills me to the bone. It leaves you hanging, your imagination running wild with possibilities, each more horrifying than the last.
And that's the brilliance of this story. It doesn't need to spell everything out. It leaves space for the listener, you, to fill in the gaps with your own fears.
Right. It's like the story becomes a mirror reflecting our own anxieties about the unknown. And speaking of anxieties, one thing that struck me about the Amazing Clouds is how they seem to tap into a very modern fear, the fear of surveillance.
That's a fascinating connection. We live in an age where our every move is tracked, our data collected, our lives documented online. It's not a stretch to imagine those unseen entities in the clouds as a metaphor for the unseen eyes that are constantly watching us in the digital age.
Exactly. It's like the story saying you think you're safe, you think you're anonymous, but there are things out there watching you, things you can't even comprehend.
And that ties into another layer of the Amazon cloud story, the role of technology. On the one hand, it's through technology that the warning is spread, that people are alerted to the danger. But on the other hand, technology also becomes a conduit for the horror.
Think about Patrick's phone call. It's through that phone call that we as listeners experience his terror firsthand. The technology brings the horror right into our living rooms, making it feel all the more real, all the more inescapable.
Precisely. It's like the story is highlighting the double-edged sword of technology. It can connect us, inform us, but it can also expose us to new threats, new fears, things we might never have encountered without it.
And this theme of technology as both a blessing and a curse resonates with a lot of other stories circulating online. There seems to be a growing fascination with tales of glitches, of strange occurrences in video games, simulations, even everyday devices.
It's as if we're becoming increasingly aware of the fragility of the digital world. The fact that it can be manipulated, corrupted, even turned against us.
Like that story about the gamer who got trapped in a repeating loop within a game, unable to escape no matter what he did. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? The idea that the technology we rely on could suddenly malfunction, could trap us, could even become a portal to something sinister.
And those stories tap into a deep-seated anxiety about our growing dependence on technology. What happens when the systems we rely on start to break down? What happens when the lines between the real and the virtual blur?
The missing cloud story takes this anxiety a step further. It suggests that the threat might not be a glitch, a malfunction, but something intentional, something with a purpose.
Something that's using technology to observe us, to study us, maybe even to manipulate us.
It's a chilling thought, and one that resonates with a lot of people who are starting to question the role of technology in their lives. Are we becoming too reliant on these devices, these networks, these systems that we don't fully understand?
And are we opening ourselves up to new dangers by doing so? The incessant cloud story doesn't provide answers, but it certainly raises some important questions. It's a reminder that the digital world, like the sky above us, can hold mysteries and terrors that we're only beginning to glimpse.
Now, shifting gears slightly, the incessant clouds aren't the only example of chilling encounters spreading online. There are countless other stories that tap into this fear of the unknown, of things that defy explanation. And one recurring theme that really gets under my skin is the idea of the doppelganger.
Ah, yes. The doppelganger, that unsettling figure who looks exactly like you, but isn't you. Often seen as a harbinger of bad luck, even death.
It's a concept that's been around for centuries, but it seems to have taken on a new life in the digital age. People sharing stories about seeing their own likeness in unexpected places, often accompanied by a sense of dread, a feeling that something is deeply wrong.
There's something incredibly unsettling about the idea of your own image being turned against you. It's a violation of identity, a blurring of the lines between self and other that can be deeply disturbing.
And these doppelganger stories often play on that sense of unease, like the stories of the woman who saw her own reflection wink at her in a mirror, only to later discover that her twin sister had died at that exact moment. It's a classic example of the doppelganger as a harbinger of doom.
Precisely. And these stories tap into a primal fear of losing control, of our own identity becoming fragmented, uncertain. If we can't even trust our own reflection, then what can we trust?
It's a question that haunts a lot of these online encounters. They challenge our perceptions of reality, make us question what we see, what we hear, what we believe. And that, I think, is what makes them so compelling, so terrifying.
They remind us that there are still mysteries in the world, things that defy explanation, things that lurk on the edges of our understanding.
And it's not just doppelgangers. There are also countless stories about encounters with creatures, entities that seem to defy categorization. They blur the lines between animal and human, reality and nightmare.
Yes, these cryptid encounters often occur in liminal spaces, forests, abandoned buildings, places that exist on the fringes of our everyday experience. They tap into a primal fear of the wild, the untamed, the things that lurk just beyond the edges of our campfire light.
Like the story of the hiker who stumbles upon a shadowy figure in the woods. A creature with glowing red eyes and claws that seem to stretch for miles. It's the stuff of nightmares, right? And yet these stories persist. They spread. They find new life online.
What's interesting is how technology plays a role in these encounters as well. People capturing blurry images on their phones, recording strange sounds, sharing their experiences in online forums. It's almost as if the technology is giving a voice to these creatures, to these experiences that might have once been dismissed as mere folklore.
Right? It's like the internet becomes a sort of digital campfire, where we gather to share these tales of the unknown, to try and make sense of the things that frighten us.
And in doing so, we create a collective awareness, a shared sense of unease. It's no longer just one person's experience. It's something that we're all grappling with, something that's seeping into our collective consciousness.
Which brings us back to the incessant clouds. It's not just a story. It's a symptom of something larger. A growing anxiety about the unknown, about the forces that might be lurking just beyond our perception.
And the fact that this story originates and spreads online makes it all the more potent. It speaks to the way the internet has blurred the lines between reality and fiction, between the world we know and the worlds we can only imagine.
We're constantly bombarded with information, with images, with stories from all corners of the globe. And it can be difficult to discern what's real, what's fake, what's simply a product of our collective anxieties.
But perhaps that's the point. The unpleasant cloud story, like all good horror stories, forces us to confront those anxieties, to grapple with the things that we don't understand, the things that frighten us.
It's a reminder that even in the digital age, with all our knowledge and technology, we are still vulnerable to the unknown. There are still mysteries out there, things that can shake us to our core and remind us of our own fragility.
And maybe, just maybe, that's a good thing. A little fear can be healthy. It can keep us on our toes. It can remind us to be humble in the face of the vast and often unsettling universe we inhabit.
Well, that's certainly a thought to leave you with as you head out into the world today. Keep your eyes on the sky, but don't forget to look around you too. The unknown can lurk in the most unexpected places.
And remember, if you enjoyed these explorations into terror and urban myths, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and give us a like. We'll be back next week with another chilling tale from the digital frontier. Until then, stay safe and keep those curtains closed.